Welcome to Quick Course Digest. Today, we're breaking down the entire U.S. government.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to treat the government like a giant piece of software. We'll look at its core architecture, the user rights built in to protect you, and the major programs it runs.
First up, the blueprint. To understand how this whole system works, we gotta start with its three core components. The entire structure is built on these three distinct branches. You've got the legislative branch, that's Congress, and their job is to write the laws. Then the executive branch, headed by the president, puts those laws into action. And finally, the judicial branch, the courts, gets to decide what those laws actually mean. It's a design meant to spread power out, so no single part becomes too dominant. What's really fascinating is how the president has to juggle multiple, very different jobs. As commander-in-chief, the president leads the most powerful military in the world, a role that was famously highlighted when President George W. Bush landed on that aircraft carrier. But at the same time, as head of state, the president is also the nation's top diplomat, setting the tone for foreign policy. Think of President Kennedy creating the Peace Corps to spread American values abroad. Two huge roles, one person. Meanwhile, over in the judicial branch, there's this constant philosophical tension. On one side, you have what's called judicial activism, where judges see their role as actively interpreting the Constitution to meet modern challenges, and they're more willing to strike down laws to expand rights. On the other side, you have judicial restraint, where judges believe they should defer to the elected branches, Congress and the president, unless a law is just clearly unconstitutional. This debate, it shapes some of the most important court decisions we see. But this powerful framework isn't absolute. The government's operating system has built-in security settings designed to protect you, your fundamental freedoms. Okay, so this is a crucial point, really understanding this distinction. Civil liberties are your protections from government overreach. Think of them as a giant do not enter sign for the government. Civil rights, on the other hand, are guarantees of equal treatment by the government. So it's not about what the government can't do, but what it must do to make sure everyone is treated fairly. These liberties are the core personal freedoms you're probably most familiar with. Think of them as the foundational protections listed right there in the Bill of Rights: freedom of speech, religion, the press, and so on. Let's take freedom of religion, for example. It's actually a two-part shield. The Establishment Clause stops the government from creating an official state religion, and then the Free Exercise Clause stops the government from meddling with how you practice your religion. It's basically a firewall between church and state. Now, this concept shows a really key evolution in our rights. Originally, the Bill of Rights only protected you from the federal government, but through a long process called selective incorporation, the Supreme Court gradually applied most of those protections to state and local governments too, one case at a time over many decades. The system also has these critical protections for anyone accused of a crime. The exclusionary rule, for instance, says that prosecutors can't use evidence they got illegally, and double jeopardy means you can't be tried for the exact same crime twice after you've been found not guilty. These rules are absolutely core to the idea of a fair trial. Of course, those rights weren't always applied equally to everyone, and this brings us to what you could call the user updates, the long and still ongoing struggle to expand equality for all citizens. When courts have to decide if a law that treats people differently is constitutional, they use one of these three tests. You can think of them as different levels of difficulty. For most laws, the government just needs a good reason. That's the easy one, the rational basis test. For laws based on gender, the bar is higher. They have to prove an important interest. But for laws that discriminate based on race or religion, the government faces the toughest test of all, strict scrutiny. They have to prove a compelling reason and that the law is perfectly tailored to achieve it. And this whole struggle for equality is powerfully captured in this timeline. You can really see the long arc of history, from the Emancipation Proclamation to the devastating Plessy v. Ferguson ruling that upheld separate but equal. Then the massive reversal with Brown v. Board of Education, which was followed by decades of struggle, like the Montgomery bus boycott, that eventually led to the landmark Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts of the 1960s. And these victories weren't just won in courtrooms. They were won on the streets, through tactics like sit-ins and boycotts. Activists used civil disobedience to confront a system of segregation that was both de jure, meaning it was enforced by law, and de facto, meaning it was just enforced by social custom and choice. So after all that, what does this whole system actually do? Well, it creates and carries out public policy, the programs that literally shape our society. Making public policy generally follows a four-step cycle. First, a problem has to get on the government's to-do list. That's called agenda setting. Then, a law is passed and signed. Next, government agencies have to figure out how to actually put that law into practice. And finally, we evaluate whether or not the policy actually worked.
And we can usually group these policies into three main types. Distributive policies give big benefits to a specific group, like funding a new bridge. Regulatory policies set rules for everyone's benefit, like the FDA making sure our food is safe. And then there are redistributive policies, like Social Security or Medicaid, that deliberately move resources across society to create a crucial social safety net.
And if you follow the money, you'll see this. About 2/3 of all federal spending is mandatory. It's basically on autopilot for programs like Social Security and Medicare. Only about 1/3 is discretionary spending, which is what Congress actually gets to debate and decide on each year.
And this number right here reveals one of the biggest challenges for those mandatory programs. Back in 1950, there were over 16 workers paying into Social Security for every single retiree. Today, it's less than 3. This huge demographic shift puts enormous pressure on the long-term funding for these essential programs.
So from its three-branch blueprint to the rights that protect you, to the policies that affect your life, that's the U.S. government in a nutshell. The key takeaway is this: it's not some static document. It's a living system, constantly being updated, challenged, and changed. And the question it leaves us with is the most important one. What's next? Well, that's up to us.